start our panel discussion. I invite our speakers to take places at the podium. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Again, it's like before, you raise your hand and the mic comes to you. And before asking the question, please name the person who you address this question to. Same goes to our online audience. If you have any questions, please indicate who you ask this question. By the way, questions and answers can be also in English, so if you need to overcome the language barrier, you may use the simultaneous equipment, the headsets, in front of you at the table. I'd like to ask a question to all the practitioners from Russia, those who use BIM technologies in Russia. Have you had any experience in dealing with construction supervision? And did it help? I mean, BIM technologies, did they help in construction supervision and record keeping? All the certificates, supervision certificates, is it automated somehow in your companies? And did BIM technologies help you in dealing with state structures, state authorities? Previous askers have already asked about expert appraisal, and maybe you can elaborate on the issue. Who's going to answer the question? If you raise the hand, you will be the lucky person to answer the question. Pavel. Hi everyone, my name is Pavel. Alexey Vlasetsky, my colleague who was making the presentation together with Maria about construction supervision. If we take a standard Russian developer, well, there are very few projects in Russia where BIM technologies have been used before. So the role that we played in our project was basically around about technical supervision, how the client implements BIM technologies. So it was a real life practice with real tangible results, and the colleagues told us that yes, that was the right thing. That's what we wanted. So the requirements were met. And I'd like also to share some my personal experience on the matter. When we also only introducing the field supervision in Russia, we had to find a way how to implement it. Let's say you are building a 2-storied building, and we were just posting the vacancy online on headhunters.ru. Like, we need a construction supervision expert, and the requirement was you have to have an iPad with 360 field installed on it, because otherwise a person would come and we would have to educate this person how to do this, and they would say, no, this is not my responsibility, I do not know how to work in this 360, and I won't do this. But in our case, we set it as a requirement, so this person had to do this, and this enabled us to save, let's put it this way, on the first construction stage nothing was used, and about 15% of the project costs were lost, and we managed to save around the same 15% when we started using this app on iPad. When everything was photographed, all the changes were kept in the log, and construction log was maintained. So the client could locate it somewhere, I don't know, outdoors. The client was able to check the progress, and this helped to save just huge amounts of money. Questions? Other questions, please? We have the quickest microphone in the world. Escon company, my name is Valery. Probably my question is more for the designers. Have you had any issues with clients when you handed over a BIM model and then required a model in Revit format, RWT, and this is your intellectual property and you wouldn't want to give it to them? What do you think about AFC format? So these are my two questions. Who loves AFC format? Please raise your hands. Check. About AFC format. Our processes is without AFC format we cannot interact. We cannot ensure the interaction between designers and engineers. So our people use AFC mostly. That's the main format of information exchange between the models for us. And the second question, what was the second question? Yes, the clients, if they require the source materials and you do not want to give it to them because this is your intellectual property. Well, our clients, they haven't requested RWT format so far. NWT they did request because there are some free viewers who can that can view the model, and that's an advantage for the client, so they don't have to buy any additional software, any licenses. So the clients that we work with, they require NVD format, so free, with free viewers. To follow up, and could you elaborate on this intellectual property thing? Why is RWT is your intellectual property? Because, well, it's your client's property and you have to give everything to your client. But there are some families, some equipment, some solutions. So basically you don't want to give it to them because you've spent money for it. Well, yes. And if you invest some additional resources within your company, you see, you have to educate your client. And unless you educate it, they won't require such things if they know what to require. You have a model, just give it to your client, let them use it. Why not? This is a standard procedure, because otherwise it will always be like this. The client is separate, PDF files are separate, everything is separate. I'll probably comment on this. In my view, about AFC format, if we use BIM 360 Cloud solution, it's probably worse than the NVD format, because you lose some part of information and the model becomes less informative. And this is what happened in one of our projects that I spoke about. A Magic Add was used, then we uploaded some additional information through AFC and it didn't work well. So you had to go through several iterations. in order to ensure that all the external links are updated and all the RTF files are updated. As for RWT file export, well, we're not there yet, I think. We're not so eager to protect our intellectual property. And BIM 360 platform team, the one that we use, unfortunately or fortunately, doesn't have any access rights functionality. So like viewing only or downloading with editing. So whether we want it or not, we provide everything to the client. If we allow the client to our cloud, they have the right automatically to get all the files, and we don't see anything wrong with it for now. I'd like to add something here. I'm from Minsk myself. I'm a director at the R&D center. And in Belarus, right now, if projects are state-financed, then the client has all the rights to get all the design documentation from the designers, and they have the right for all the assets, and the same will go to BIM technology. If this is a public money, then all the rights belong to the state. If it's private money, then intellectual property stays with the developer, in our case R&D Institute. And it's the same in Russia.
It's a very valid point. The rights have been sold, and we as designers must transmit as much as possible all the information we hold so that the rights can be used. But we have to be very clear about what has been sold. It's the right to build an asset to the design. It's not the right to use that design for anything else. You have the rights for one build. You have the rights for that build. You cannot start using my Revit models for anything else. So have the Revit model, don't break the law.
Спасибо.
Thanks. Question? Konstantin, I'd like to add something to the previous, question. It was a question about families. So, do BIM teams develop families, or do you do it internally or internally in your company? The question about the intellectual properties. In a couple of years, families will be developed like ride-hauling apps in the cloud. And the developers, there will be independent developers. And there will be companies who serve as intermediaries between the developers and the clients. So, and all the services will be free of charge, these intermediary services. And nobody's going to care about intellectual property anymore. Because right now people come with paper catalogs to you, and very soon everything is going to be done digitally. And I'd like to use this as an opportunity to announce that Autodesk in a couple of weeks, so almost right now, is going to announce the quality mark, quality brand. We are going to publish a quality brand. That means that many families, or object families that are now being designed, will have this quality brand. So the quality is going to be standardized and quality stamped by us, approved by us.
Further questions? My name is Valery Voinov, TAS Project Company. A question to the international colleagues. In Russia, we have that we need to draft budgeting documentation for construction. Internationally, as I hear, there is a classify code which is linked to some particular works, material or an element of some model is related, is linked to the code, to the classifier. So what is the way how the site, how the facility of construction is budgeted, is estimated, and do you use classifier codes for that?
Кто первый?
Who will be the first?
To answer first, it's a very difficult question, actually, because for us, as a construction company, estimating the cost of a project is, of course, based on quantities, but not only on quantities. And we don't have, I mean, the cost of a project for us is man-hours, is organization, is the staff, is the equipment, and so on. So, of course, this is related to quantities, but not with a direct relationship. However, we are using, what I mean is that quantity takeoff is the basis for cost estimate. We need that. And actually, we are using as much as possible some standards to get the quantities from the model. But to be honest, we are working all around the world, and there is no one way of quantifying the things. So what we do is what I explained very quickly for the Santiago project. I mean, when we get a design and a model from a designer, it's generally not meant to do the quantity takeoff the way we want to do it. So we have to, and we don't want to modify the model from the designers for some reasons that we already discussed, but for many other reasons. So what we do is that we use other tools to get the information from this model and to split it the way we want. In Santiago project, it was the assemble product, to split the quantities according to our needs, which will be very different from one project to another, because it depends on the construction methods and so on. So this is the way we deal with quantity, costs, and then pricing the project. No, I hope I'm clear, but.
I mean, I think it's a great question. The classification systems that we are all using are very different, very varied, and very wide. We even heard this morning from our colleague the ones that's been used in Lithuania. I know for a fact myself, having had specified classification systems on a project of master format and uniformat, and being asked to ensure that every element in the model carried the proper classification code, I also know that the QS had their own code that they used to quantify. So, you know, even when we have a classification system that's being specified, the QSs still had their own internal system to work out quantities and estimates of cost. So I don't think we're any time soon going to get to a point where we have a classification system that everybody's going to work to, and it will be, you know, widely used by everybody for cost estimation.
Donatas, потом Alexander, да?
Donatas, then Alexander. In Lithuania, we already have some solutions for budgeting. We use the properties of each element. There are 3 standard parameters, properties for each component. We have, for example, a monolithic column and a dedicated parameter for initial works, main works, and final works. We add the code from the budgeting software solution to each of the properties. For quantity takeoffs, we have various codes which can use various parameters from the geometry on volumes, length, and width. The budgeting program automatically picks a code, and it provides and it generates the budget sheet, the cost sheet. On classification, did you finish? So we are working on international purchasing. We are an international firm, and each country has their own classifiers, and they also have their own approaches to calculating costs for facilities. In Finland we have TAL 80, and although it's the same in Russia, the approaches can vary. So it's not possible to unify everything right away, but we can make certain steps to do that. In the model we add metadata and various parameters. If you work in Revit, each object, a wall or windows, can have varied metadata. We integrate our own metadata to the model, and we do it using the TAL80 standard that we use in St. Petersburg. Then we also use the international classifier used for 8 countries, the OmniClass classifier, so we add some additional parameters. For example, one of our customers might organize a big tender on the framework purchasing. So if they want to buy elevators for all the countries, and if they want to buy similar doors or similar plating, so the purchasing power will be very high, and if we unify the process, we can have a big discount, and it will help us then to understand how to move forward. So the headquarters might define the volumes, and they request volumes from various countries for the following 3 to 5 years. So this metadata extrapolated to various countries, and using the OmniClass, we can fetch this data automatically, then send it to the purchasing department and organize a tender using these volumes, and get a very good price. So we conducted several tenders like this last year, and they were successful. Of course, budget people need to work further, but in overall process, it is a good contribution. So 30 items for framework purchasing. So we also do this in Russia. This is something that simplifies work significantly. We have an online question, and then I pass the floor to the colleague there. A question from the town of Novouralsk. What challenges in Revit did you face? So it's a provocative question. I like collaboration technology in Revit when all participants, all stakeholders can work on the same model. Working with contractors, very often we face when they request us not to use it anymore and stick to BIM 360, for example, for each of the contractors to send the data each week. They send their models, different versions, to watch the assembled model. You have to combine it using Revit or some other tool. Why we decide to do that? When there are several contractors, several firms, for BIM 360, for example, it has a limited number of access rights: administrator, project administrator, a person who can send and download files, and also a viewer right. So the access configurations are quite limited. That means that people who cannot work in Revit, who not know how to do it, they might just delete the file or corrupt the file, and it's very hard to correct this mistake or to come back to the previous iteration. So the team might include up to 50 architects, and any of the architects might unintentionally corrupt a file, and that will be an issue. We are currently testing the the x60 docs solution, and we think that it will be more flexible if we have some individual configurations. Such an issue can be overcome. Thank you, Elena. And I have also a comment to make. Shared work can have some issues. Using BIM 360 and collaboration for Revit and cloud technologies sometimes is very important and is very convenient when you are in different places. We have implemented a number of projects in this shared environment, and it was a good opportunity to involve all the participants, and we were able to access a file of people located in other cities, so we could provide our feedback to them very quickly after we viewed the file. As for disadvantages for BIM 360, and that was mentioned by Alexander, there is this issue when people might delete the file unintentionally. There are some there could be some problems with BIM 360 with Revit collaboration, but it's more an issue related to Autodesk. The technology is being developed, it is being improved, and these are some technical issues that might occur. This is just a working standard situation which might happen. Thank you.
Some practical suggestions. So at Burr Happold, we have about 2,000 people. We probably have 7,500 live models as we speak. What we've learned over the last 10 years, and Craig is here as testament, is that you need to be very, very diligent on model management. So the value of BIM is to bring together the information. But if your models get too big, if your link files get too many, if one part of the team is on revision pack 3 and the other one is on revision pack 2, then it starts falling over. So much so that we have, as I just indicated, a live monitoring of every single Revit model in the company running at all time, just to make sure that Craig can do his work and immediately identify that the guy in New York has just upgraded to pack 3 and the rest of the team is still at pack 2 and the model starts crashing. So model management, watch it, watch it, watch it.
I would say the same. As a general contractor company dealing with a huge project, our direct role in the BIM is BIM management. And it means that we have to really address the questions of what are the status of the different models coming from the designers, coming from the subcontractors, which are updated every day. And for this, we use the British standard 1192 general procedure. Even sometimes we don't go in the details, but in the principle we use it. So there is the work in progress part of it, where each designer, and it can be a team of some people working in different parts of the world, but they are all collaborating within one entity, one company, or one group. So they can do whatever they want, but then they give us the model, it's kind of stamped, and it goes in the shared area. And there in the shared area, we know exactly the different parts of the model, what is their status, and not only we know, but all the other people who have to work with these models know exactly the status. It's the way we are working currently.
Спасибо. В продолжение вопроса. Вопрос к бюро Хаппель.
I think the comment that was originally made, though, was challenges with Revit. Yeah? And I think we've all heard today that many of us are Revit users, and you know, there's a good reason for that. But I think also we appreciate that there are challenges with this, and there's a reason why many of the world's architects aren't using Revit. They're using Rhino, and they're using CATIA, and they're using, you know, many other different packages which can handle complex geometrical shapes. And the reason for that is because Revit doesn't do it very well. And that is a struggle I'm sure that we are all having daily. And I think if there was ever anything that I wish that could be resolved, it's that Revit could handle those complex geometries in a much simpler way.
Спасибо. Вопрос к бюро Хаббальд.
A question to Bureau Happold. Happold. So you are 2,000 people strong. How many of you work in BIM management, are involved in BIM management? In data exchange, data quality assurance, etc. How many? Give me a figure.
That I have as a regional representative information manager, BIM manager, is one of 8. So there are 8 people like myself around the globe, and then we manage teams underneath us. But we don't have dedicated BIM management people. Our people who work in our BIM projects and in our BIM models are our engineers and our technicians. It's not a separate group of people. So I regularly will be working with mechanical engineers, structural engineers, who are acting in a BIM management role on their given projects. But that's very much how we work. We don't have a separate, dedicated, specialist BIM team. The idea within Bureau Happold is that everyone is BIM capable and everyone is working in a BIM environment on every project.
Как долго вы такую команду собирали?
How long did it take for you to assemble such team?
When Alain joined the company 4 years ago, I think that was Alain's original task was to configure this arrangement that we have now.
Now, we need BIM champions. We need together to go out and say, we want to all work in BIM. We need to share what we learn. What Craig learns in Dubai, I need New York to know. What Ron learns in LA, I need Craig to know in Abu Dhabi. That is why we have champions. So that's the rule number 1. And rule number 2 is that we mentioned the ISO 19650 information management standard. Now, we all go to video conference, right? We go to video conference and then, hello, St. Petersburg, you there? Yeah, wait, oh, no, wait, can you see me? No, I cannot see you. Video conference is 20 years old and is still not working out of the box. Every BIM project needs an information manager. His role is to make the video conference in BIM work. Every project. 7,000 projects, 7,000 information manager person who makes sure BIM works in the project. But this person could be me, this person can be Craig, this person can be an engineer. Anybody can do the role, but you need one of those.
Спасибо. Вопрос?
Thank you. My question is a follow-up question that I asked my international colleagues, now to my compatriots. Quick background story. I was at a workshop at cost estimation, about cost estimation and budgeting. People in this area in Russia are undergoing a little revolution, because what cost budgeting tools do we have right now? Indexing tools, and several regions in Russia are now moving to resource-based unmanned tools for cost budgeting. What's your take on this? So each resource has its own classification number. And when we implemented BIM in our company, we had our own classification system. And now we can sort everything out in Revit very quickly and easily and search for some things. We understand that this is all the reinforcement structure. This code stands for equipment. So the question is, do we need to harmonize our codes? So cost estimation people will have a single database for the entire Russia, for the pool of Russian companies, and now they have to select the materials. If they estimate a cost of something, they have to select materials to be ordered, and to select a certain material to be ordered, they need to know the code for this material. And as colleagues have mentioned, they have their own plugin to do this in Lithuania. And we have the same plugin in Russia as well. We also wrote it. And on our part, we can help cost estimators and budget people to use this, to facilitate this process. So the question to you, what do you think? Do we need to go this way, or I'm gonna use these codes, you're gonna use those codes, and someone else uses something else entirely? And what's the question? What's the question to the Russian participants? What's their opinion about this? What do they think? Do we need to move towards harmonization? So those of you with Russian passports, Russian passport holders, please answer the question. Let me take the question. Well, we haven't worked with cost estimation before, but we've done a number of public projects, public buildings. So I understand your question. I think that the BIM philosophy, BIM ideology, is about harmonization. And what you described, I have this, you have that, it's not about unification, it's not about harmonization. So if there are any possibilities for harmonization, I think we should use it, and there's nothing to discuss here. We need to unify, and we need to harmonize. And the easier it can be done, the better for the industry and for those who make cost estimates in particular. Is anyone now doing this in your company? Well, we don't have BIM projects that would require such cost estimations. We mostly deal with private clients and their projects. So we would like to have all public projects in BIM in the nearest future, but unfortunately I don't think we will see them in the next couple of years. So the relevance of this question, well, it's growing. The question is getting more and more relevant, but we still do not have the right facilities where we could try this and get our hands on. Yet you mentioned a very important thing about harmonization. We need to do this, and without Autodesk, I don't think we will be able to do this. There has to be someone who will bring all the cost estimators together with the designers and all the relevant stakeholders. Last year, I had a minute during the conference. I found the contacts of project managers online, and I sent an email to them. Someone responded to me about cost estimations, and it actually resulted in me going to them, paying several visits, and explaining to them that pretty soon we are going to have a universal classifier in Russia, and their services will not be needed anymore because the there's going to be a harmonized environment with all the codes and classification, and they've heard my view, and they just don't believe that they won't be relevant anymore. So they are not willing to integrate with our projects, with our products, and the progress is very slow in this regard. Donatas also wanted to say something. I do not quite see the problem here. What needs to change? Do you need to change a database, a data structure, applications? What do you need to change in order to make it work? And I'm going to answer the question myself. Nothing. You need to change nothing, because there is already a large database. Let's see how Google works. You enter some keywords, punch in some words, and it works. So you do not need any plugin to browse through the database. If you select a column, then I can, or a pillar, I will be able to see all the works related to this pillar. So all the developers and designers need to start adapting their solutions for BIM, so that AFS format would be supported. Sometimes some environments do not support even Excel spreadsheets. So it's the problem of the producers, of the manufacturers, not ours. We actually do have the software that does everything, that gets all the cost estimation documentation from the model. Let me explain. QTO is about exporting some figures from the model, but cost estimation, it's European approach. Cost estimation in Russia is more creative. You have to also indicate like 15 different ratios that, using the database, will enable you to do the right cost estimation. It's not just about the figures, and they're not always rational or logical. And if you take any solution out of the box, you won't have this information there. So this is the bottleneck. So cost estimations always come to this. The BIM data that cost estimators need, well, designers do not always understand which ratios to use, because this is something that cost estimators need to do. What does it depend on, these ratios? What do they depend on? Like season, for instance, or density. So these are the factors, or the ratios. Or say your pipeline goes 3 meters above ground, and do you need scaffolding for the installation of this pipe? Because the factor starts from 3 meters and higher. But if during the construction you have a platform underneath this pipe, so using, say, a step ladder or something without any additional scaffolding, then, well, you know, you cannot grasp Russia with only mind, like the famous poet Tuchev used to say in Russia. I'd like to add something. The pricing strategy in Russia and in Belarus is quite transparent. We began using the common metrics, common European metrics, about 4 years ago. What we're talking about here is the classifier of the current price database. This classifier is a structure, and now we have BIM element library as an additional element. So the classification of this BIM library, will it be transparent for the current price classifier for the ultimate cost calculation? That's the question. In Kazakhstan, for instance, they also have current price classifier. Russia has it, Belarus has it, and they're different. But we are harmonizing this pricing approach so that if you use some formulas, you can adapt the elements from one database and transport it to another database. And this classifier that is approved by the state, and you have to use it, then, well, you need to adapt this classifier taking into consideration the new elements, BIM elements. All right. Any other questions? Good afternoon. My question is to the organizers. I'd like, first of all, to thank you for this wonderful event. It was very well organized. And I have a question. My name is Pavel, Aggressor Company. Progressor Company. We produce some process equipment and steel structures. We are communicating with PSS Greatech about the implementation of our products and implementation of BIM technologies in our work, BIM and PDM. And the question is, are you going to showcase the industrial examples in the future conferences? Because design is fine, but investment construction project does not end with design. And lots of things depend on the quality of construction. So the better quality the construction documentation will be, the more precise and more realistic the final product will be. But currently, we haven't received a single BIM model over the last 3 years, and that's a sad truth. So that's the first question. And the second question is to the designers. Have you met any examples of good producers with who use BIM in their work to manufacture, say, steel structures or something else? Thank you.
On the first question, we will take this into account and we will think how to do it. PSS Greitech, as an international company, we have a solution for the full cycle of metal frames production. We have a dedicated solution for 3D models and for automating factories for producing metal frames. And to your second question, I'd like to give the floor to my colleagues.
I'd just like to give you my example for your comment with regard to your steel structures. So, on the Museum of the Future project that we talked about earlier, we were very specific in the subcontractor supply chain and their BIM capability that we required from them. And specifically, that related to the MEP contractor, to the structural steel contractor, and to the facade contractor. It was absolutely critical that those 3 subcontractor companies were fully BIM capable. And to that extent, as part of the selection process, we were involved in interviewing and selecting these companies based on that experience. Now, we were really, really lucky in that on our steel, in all cases, we actually have local companies in the Middle East who have far outstripped our expectations with regards to their capabilities. And these are local companies in the Middle East producing complicated steel structures in their plants direct from the models through their digital fabrication and machine cutting facilities. And I've personally been to both these factories just recently, actually, and saw these processes at work. And the number of people who have said to me, oh, you must be getting this steel produced somewhere, and it must be coming from America or some. And it's not, it's local companies who do have that BIM capability. Now, obviously, I can't comment on your Russian market here. But what I would say is that if your BIM process is so critical to the design, in our case, of our buildings, then you have no other choice than to make sure that those subcontractors have the BIM capabilities that you need.
I could say the same if I take this example of Santiago Airport project. We have a subcontractor for the steel structure, and actually what we did is first we had a general designer doing I would say the basic design of the structure, and this was part of all the design process that we had. And then we handed that to the steel fabricator, the one who really produces the steel, which was a local Chilean company. And they did all the detailed models. I think it's in Tekla, and they use it also for the fabrication. And we know there are some tag systems to follow the fabrication, the painting, and all that process. And all this information comes into our BIM models, where we aggregate the different models, and one of them being from this steel fabricator, steel structure provider. It's quite a big company in Chile, but however.
There's another point to make as well for some of these subcontractor companies, is that in lifting their game on a big project, they then have a differentiator from the rest of the market for the next job. And that's the way that some of our contractors viewed this. They viewed that their association on this project and the level of BIM implementation they would have to take it to would be a differentiator for them for the future. And, you know, that was the way they viewed the project going in.
Ну, я здесь, если позволите, еще добавлю.
A comment from Russia, or probably some examples that are closer to our Russian experiences. I'd like to draw an example of Lahta Center. There they use 6 triangular slabs and plates. These plates are produced by a Russian company using the CPH machines. They've been using these machines for a very long time, and they have quite a sufficient experience. So these machines can use the parameters derived from BIM models. So this is a stage when we have the unification of design documentation and data coming from BIM models. So this system is already up and running, and it can handle the data from BIM models. Do we have a last question? Please raise your hand. My name is Ivan Sisoyev, Project Institute number 1. Digital relief model. Is there any classification that influences the cost of such a model, or do we have do we have some research on that, probably to understand the cost of making geological cuts? A question to our colleagues representing the geological company. The key criterion is the requirements of regulations. The model depends on documents and on the stages, on various stages of a project. If we need additional data to address additional tasks, then it can be done in the framework of additional design. We don't have any extra prices, additional prices for these additional services. They just don't exist, and there are no additional price tags for additional beam models or additional beam sections, as far as we know. If the base pricing models are used by the state, then with information digital models it can be used, but there are no exact price tags at the moment. It all depends on the agreement between designers and customers. My question was more on tender documentation, on selecting survey firms that could, or research firms that could provide such data. For example, the cost for hectares of operation. So, how can it increase? Well, it depends, because it's a difficult question because it depends on many factors. Thank you. The last question. Please use the mic. Konstantin Koshman, Leningrad project. Designers need to invest much to developing BIM technologies, which is related to training of people, to organizing promotional events, and they also spend money on software. At the same time, using BIM is not always something that contributes a lot to success. Could you share your experience? Do customers value what they get from BIM solutions? Probably they get better quality, probably they get more possibilities to get additional information from the projects that they receive. Are these projects more expensive? So can you share information on that? I can start. In my presentation I talked about this already. To evaluate the work done by designers, you need to understand that the final result of this service. Not all customers have qualified personnel to do this, or they don't have good subcontractors. Customers do not always have a chance to understand the real value of this result. But I think as we move forward, the situation may change and will change, and probably for now, customers are not ready to pay extra penny for that. Selecting design organizations, design firms that can work with BIM comes from a different pool of designers. So these design firms have their own approach to pricing, and they work with those customers who need BIM, and they integrate higher prices that include software, equipment, and other related services. So the final price is higher, so the customers that want to get BIM and who want to save money at the same time very often get inferior results, and this is a very frequent story. Alexander, I'd like to be as smooth and flexible in replying this question as possible. So how much steel do you need for slabs in the concrete in kilograms? Slabs does not depend on the flooring, on the 150. 150 is the number. I had a contractor 5 years ago. We don't work with them anymore. They offered us 100 kilograms. After we wrote letters to regulatory agencies, they provided their rationale with ratios. In our projects, it's 60 to 70 kilograms for a building worth 12 million rubles. The difference is huge. So the difference may be 3 to 4 times higher. So how you make calculations when you provide this ratio is not relevant for me. I have a scope of work that has certain requirements to this element. I don't want to see any empty basements, any unused spaces. I want to have as much efficiency as possible. Customers want to have a good result, but at the same time contractors want to be working conveniently. The ratio of space utilization may have a certain figure for various floors. I might have various ratios, 0.82 to 0.62, for example. There could be good connections in such a building. Our designers face a lot of limits in this regard. We also might face challenges when installing at the installation stage. There are issues with communications, with pipelines, with ventilations. We had many examples when during installation we saw issues in spacing, in parking lots, for example. That was in Petrogradsky district in St. Petersburg. So to avoid this situation, for this particular project, I asked designers to compensate, to reimburse the losses because of that. So to do this or not to do this is up to you, and you make this decision yourself.
Петр,
Can I add something? Probably the last comment, and before we wrap up. I'd like to reformulate the answer. I used to work in a company rather, where we used to do all parts of the model, except some of them. The client didn't pay us for this. And then 6 months pass, I come to a conference, I speak about different models, functionality, etc. So 6 months pass, then I got to receive a phone call from someone at a conference. He says, we should meet in Moscow, just buy a ticket train, meet in Moscow tomorrow. We have one construction project for $400 million for a state hospital in Moscow, and this hospital is now being commissioned any day now. That's my story. Well, thank you. Let's give the round of applause to our panelists, and this concludes our conference. I'd like to thank all the participants for agreeing to be with us today and spending their time. I'm sure that each and every one of you has learned something new today, and I'd like to thank you for coming, and especially those who survived until the end, the strongest one. The question of to beam or not to beam is not relevant anymore. The question is how we promote BIM. That's a positive trend, which I'm glad to see. I wish you to have the strength and energy to fulfill what you dream about, and to bring your dreams to fruition. Thank you and have a good day.